know most of you are familiar with the world of theater, and so the project, and I won't steal any of your thunder, but people usually don't know what goes into putting something on its feet, and the amount of work, especially that has to deal with a creative team. And your creative team that you had to deal with includes a director, of course, who kind of calls all the major shots, but you have scenic designer and lighting designer and costume designer and makeup people involved in it. Any theatrical event, any movie, if you watch the credits on a movie sometime, look at the credits under the art department. So there's an art director, and then there will be 500 or 600 people involved in making the film look the way it looks. And you don't realize that all those people, there's like a model maker who is making little tiny things. Well, in the world of theater, we don't typically have that kind of resources. But the same process takes place. So there are dozens of meetings where we decide things that throw you for a loop because you're like, what art style are we tackling? Yes, this one. I've never heard of it. You have now. So do some research and find out. So anyway, I'll let you do your presentation. Claire Jensen, and here we go. Congratulations.
All right. Using the trash can as a table. All right, so pulling back the curtain, a look into costuming and the creative process. I was approached by Brian last fall, spring, I don't know, spring, about costuming one of the fall shows because he knew that that was something that I have always been interested in. And so crazily I said yes. Didn't know what I was getting into. So we're going to go over the creative process, a short explanation of what it is and how it works, and then the application of it to the squirrels, which is the show. So this creative process, sorry if I'm talking really fast, there's a lot to go through. There are 7 steps in the creative process: commitment, analysis, research, incubation, selection, implementation, and evaluation. Okay, so the first step is commitment, which is basically wholeheartedly committing yourself to this project, this process, doing whatever it takes more or less to get through it. The analysis is the really, really long part. I think I wrote like a page and a half on it, which is the gathering information of the show, the style of how it was originally set, the playwright, the original intentions, and then also how you choose to reset it. And that all goes into the research as well. The analysis has 2 primary goals of gathering information that sorts out the challenge areas and identifying spots that will need more research. So there is a wonderful man called Francis Hodge who's created what is known as the Hodge analysis. And y'all can look through the binder later, it is 43 pages long. It includes the Hodge analysis, and that is questions such as, where does it take place? Who's the playwright? But it also incorporates questions such as, what is the political climate? Are there any religious factors at play? So that's a really interesting thing to look at when you're going through a play, which in the squirrels, there's a lot of political factors that go into this. Yeah, and then the research, 2 primary types of research, background and conceptual, and the background plays into the analysis of the type of play it is, the historical period, and the conceptual is the realistic approach of how will it work in a sticky situation. Within the squirrels itself, there was a point in the script where Sirius is supposed to get fatter and fatter and fatter every time you see him. And I wrote that down as, here's a problem spot of something that I'm going to have to figure out. And I didn't, but the actor did, and it worked, and it was great. And incubation is the shortest step in the process, which is letting the ideas kind of sit for a while, let it all kind of simmer. Selection is a time where it's finally starting to choose the things you've done. So at this point, you've done some basic sketches and ideas, and then your creative team decides what the style of the show is going to be, which that threw me for a loop, and I will go over that next. In the selection process, you also choose the color palette for the show, which is very, very important, so that you don't have your costumer deciding, I'm going to put everyone in pastels, and your scenic designer deciding, I'm going to put everything in like primary colors, so everything is red, blue, and yellow. And then your lighting designer decides, I'm going to bathe everything in a nice green light. And then you get to the show and it looks terrible because no one like decided on a singular idea. Implementation is when everything kind of starts to come together. You are creating the show itself, creating the costumes, the lighting, the design, the makeup. And this 7-step creative process goes for every single department in theater. So it goes for the director, the technical director, the set, the lighting, the props, the costumes, the makeup, the hair. Everyone goes through this process. And then evaluation is afterwards. You all kind of look back at your work and say, what worked, what didn't work, what can we use for next time, what should we scrap and never touch ever again. And so, yeah. So one of the things that we decided with our show is, so you decide on a metaphor and an art style. And Brian and Rusty decided on surrealism. And I was sitting there in the meeting, and I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I've never been to a production meeting before. And at this point, I'd been to a few. And I still had no idea what was going on. And so they're like, oh, let's do surrealism. Like, let's look at these different artists. Like, let's look at, all of their names are escaping my mind. Salvador Dali, let's look at his work. Let's look at Wes Anderson and his films. And so we decided to go with surrealism, which, defined by lovely Dr. Google, is a 20th century avant-garde movement in art and literature which sought to release the creative potential of the unconscious mind, for example, by the irrational juxtaposition of images. And I will show you the set design after this to hopefully like spark what that means. And then the metaphor that Rusty chose was a papier-mâché acorn, which also in that meeting, and he said that, and I'm like, I don't know what that means either. Rusty, what do you mean? And he described it as, you can see, like, there's a metal structure on the inside, maybe chicken wire, and you can kind of see the framing around it. And it's intentionally a little bit messy, and there are intentionally, in the costuming, like, seams that aren't perfect, or like some fraying seams at the bottom, and it doesn't look polished, which is really, really hard for me because I like historic costuming especially, and making sure that everything is tailored perfectly, and making sure all the seams are crispy. And then in this, it was, make it messy. So that was fun. This was the set that we worked with. Eve Gilmore painted the set, Brian helped design the set, and it was incredible. And so this was kind of our basis of surrealism. And going off of this, you can see like the tree is colors that trees normally aren't. And there's an acorn in the corner that's kind of like the sun, and the French words around it for this is not an acorn, referring to the, can't remember his name, the artist of like, this is not a, I can't remember what it is.
Right.
This is not a pipe, thank you. So yeah, and just kind of a little like decorative. And then you can also see within the set it's elevated at points. So for every costume, I decided right off the bat that we're not going to try to go with normal shoes, we're going to use jazz shoes because they're fitted to the foot, they have a split sole in them, and you can very easily feel the ground beneath your feet. So then when there would be stage combat moments, or even just moving up and down on the platforms, you'd be able to feel it, and then there'd be no chance of like slipping off. I originally wanted to go with bare feet, but then I was told that that'd be a really bad idea because there might be nails sticking out. So that was the original intention and idea. So we have the squirrels, and it kind of looks like a postcard, but I'm okay with that. So in this picture, we can see 5 of our main characters. Yeah, 5. There is a 6th that we are introduced to later on in the play. So we have in the middle, we have Cirrus, who is the patriarch of the family. We have Mammalia, who is the mother. We have Carolinensis, who's kind of, who is Cordata's kind of lover, and they're trying to form like an alliance. Oh no. And then we have Rodentia, who's the adopted daughter. So I started off, for whatever reason, I don't have all of the designs on me anymore. I think I know where they are, but I don't know for sure. So we have Mammalia's designs first, and those were just a couple of the sketches that I did for her. I wanted some like big flowing sleeves, some like brown pants, and like sheer. And within all of this, we decided a color scheme. And Brian tasked me with coming up with the entire color scheme all by myself, and I'm like, I don't want to ruin the show, color scheme, oh no. And so I chose kind of earthy colors, more reds and golds, some blues and grays and greens, so kind of sticking in with all of that. And so that was what her initial sketches looked like. And I really struggled with the concept of surrealism at first because I had no idea how to costume that. And a piece of advice I got was create a normal costume and make it wacky. Like extend pieces, make sleeves bigger than they should be, like make a shirt tail hang out to the floor. And so I attempted that. And so we have some big sleeves. And then this is what Mamalia's final costume looked like. You can see under it's originally a full-length skirt and it's been pinned at certain points to kind of give it a scalloped edge look, which also helped with movement. And then a cute little brown frilly top, very simple, very motherly still. And then an apron made of all sorts of different fabrics. This is part of the fabric from Cordata's skirt. We have a little bit from various ensemble members' costumes, and then also just some fun fabric for pouches, because they're squirrels and they carry nuts with them everywhere. And then these were the two final costumes for Mamalia and Cirrus. Cirrus also had a tie, which was not on in this photo. And so you have kind of Cirrus's patches along his sleeve of like he was once a great squirrel general in the squirrel army and like trying to relive those glory days. And some very fun textured pants made of upholstery material. So that's fun. And then Mamalia's, as I've described. And if you can see, so everyone's makeup generally was a basic corrective makeup, nothing too big, nothing too fancy, with the exception of one or two characters. And for the hair, you can see Mamalia's is up in two little buns, kind of looking like ears, and Cirrus's is back in two braids. And that is important later on for Cordata's. So here we have Rodentia, Chloe, her original costumes. For the original idea of this one, I came up with like the wrap pants because I thought those were the coolest thing ever. And then I ended up using it later for a different character. And so you see like the giant sleeves, the giant bows, because another task for this was to kind of create something in each character that would look almost like a tail hanging down. So in Amalia's it has this, which is normally hanging out in the back, and in Rodentia's, there's normally another piece of bow, but it's this giant bow that hangs down all the way. And so that was kind of a cool piece for that one. And we can see that it doesn't quite look like how it originally did. We had to rebuild the straps on it and make more of a sweetheart neckline to give more coverage and more comfortability with the actor. Because one of my huge things as a costumer is I want my people to be comfortable and feel good in what they're wearing and not be so uncomfortable that they don't even want to step out of the dressing room. And then I took this really cool skirt, and it was floor length, and it killed me to have to cut it. But I like very unevenly cut along the lines, very messy. But yeah, and so that was how Rodentia's ended up turning out, which is, it worked very well because she was very much kind of a blushing bombshell, if you will. She was kind of a flirt, and so very much playing into like I'm kind of a showgirl with my sparkles and my skirt, and yeah. And then Ashley's, Cordata, is here. So originally I really wanted to do a pleated skirt for her, and kind of tie in some burlap and make like a really uneven pleat. And then I wanted to construct kind of a wrap top with like weird straps on the top, and then a burlap shrug. I created the burlap shrug, it was never used. So yeah. We did end up having the pleated skirt, very uneven pleats. Anna Kruger helped me with this because I don't have a ton of experience with pleating, and she does, and so she helped me with that. And then there's normally like a purple bodysuit that goes under this, but I couldn't put it on because legs. And yeah, so we put kind of a pink vest over it to give more coverage, more comfortability, and also to kind of hint to the fact that she has a little bit of an alliance with the fox squirrels later on. And all of the costumes are kind of symbolic in those ways. And so here's what they look like on. See, you can see Cordata's hair has both the buns and the braids from both of her biological parents. And then there's Rodentia, who just has these big Hollywood waves, kind of, she's her own squirrel, she's doing her own thing, and Cordata's very much still within the family unit. Yeah. And then we have Carolinensis over on the very corner. I wanted to do like pants, and then like a roll-up sleeve shirt, and then with like a nice vest or like a sweater vest. And then you can see that I started to do like the kind of draping of the shirt, and then I don't know, it didn't ever go anywhere with it. But I really wanted to do something like that. So we came up with this. So these are wrap pants, and they're double layers, so when Sophie would walk, you could see kind of the silver on the outside, or on the inside, and then the orange on the outside. And I made so many mistakes while making these pants, but I only had enough fabric to make one pair. But I think it works pretty well. I had to add a lot of fabric up here to give more of a waist to it, because I cut way too far up the leg. Yeah, and then the orange on the outside is a heavy fabric, and so it didn't quite move the way I hoped it would, but I think it still worked. And then on the inside we have this nice golden black sweater, and then this was originally long sleeved, and then during dress rehearsal one night I looked at Sophie and I'm like, I don't quite like how that looks. So I took it and I cut one sleeve off. And I made it into a little bit of an armband, as you'll see in the next photo. And then later on, like, I was just kind of watching and I'm like, I don't like it, it doesn't look right. So I cut the other sleeve off. And made that into an armband too. And then it was kind of the, like, Carolinensis is the general of the fox squirrel army, so it's kind of like this big buff, like, oh, I'll take care of you, honey. Like, it doesn't take nothing from no one. And then we see another design, both of them where I finally accepted the wrap pants for Carolinensis, and then I had another top idea for Cordata, all of it very, very structured. And I wanted like the skirt to almost stand up on its own, but I couldn't figure out how to do that. And I didn't have enough time to, but I really wanted to. And then here we have the full Carolinensis and Cyrity. Cyrity was another character that I don't have the original design sheets for anymore. But Carolinensis, you can kind of see the armbands on both sides. And Carolinensis is the only one that wears tan jazz shoes, which part of this was originally because we couldn't find jazz shoes small enough for Sophie. The tan ones were the only ones that were small enough. But we also kind of worked it into, there's a line that says, oh, like, where are you really from? And Carolinensis says, well, I'm from the other side of the 7-Eleven. Which is like, she's really from somewhere else, like, really, like, doesn't belong here. And so kind of attributing the tan shoes is a little bit of an indicator of that. And then Cyrity is a character that comes in and creates chaos. And just wants to ruin everything, and is very, very good at it. And so on the first read of the script, for whatever reason, I read Cyrity as a fox squirrel. Don't know why. And the alliances between the gray squirrels and the fox squirrels, like they're two very separate entities, it is a very, very important plot point. And so the fact that I initially dressed Cyrity in red and gold, which were the fox squirrel colors, very problematic. Very, very confusing to the audience. So I found a gray shirt, tucked it under it, looks great now. And then kind of using the golds and the reds as almost, you know how people wear like fur jackets? It's like that. So Cyrity is wearing essentially the skin of another squirrel, which is really, really weird and sadistic, but not out of character in the slightest. And then using like the red plaid vest is like just really elevate that, like, oh, he's Cyride Ceridium Ceridius, I think it is, like from the Westnaught Ceridiums. Very, very high and mighty, like, I own this tree. And so really elevating that look. And then the script also calls for Cyrity to double as the scientist, who's the narrator who comes in 3 separate times. He's not really a scientist. The script says he's a cartoon scientist. Whatever that means. It also suggests he wears a big red bow tie, which I also could not find, and I didn't think it fit the character quite as much. So I found this nice lab coat that had like these very, very flowery sleeves, which I thought was really funny because it's supposed to be like this guy telling this story. And he comes in 3 separate times and explains very important characteristics of squirrels. The first one was that they go basically feral during mating season. The second one was very similar, and then also when a squirrel gets poisoned or overeats, they will eat clay to kind of neutralize the poison effect, but if they overeat, it just makes it worse. And then the last one was kind of the epilogue of, so here's what happened in March of 1994 in my mom's backyard. And explaining is like, we found like 40 dead squirrels that spring, which is a really fun kind of way to end it. And then we had the ensemble looks. We had seven ensemble members, only 5 are pictured here. And the ensemble was really fun to costume because I just kind of went into the costume shop and found pieces and I was like, none of these match, here you go. And kind of created very varying looks. So I'm just gonna point. On this side, we have some nice pajama pants, a silk blue shirt, and like a little hood thing that you can't really see. Here we have some, you can almost see it through the bottom, they're like red pirate pants. And then a purple kind of shirt, which I cut the sleeves all the way up to make it like kind of fringe. We have some short black pants and a women's blouse, because it was cool and that's what I found. We have more pajama pants and I think another women's blouse. And then I created this gray skirt. I believe it was one I already found, and then I added the burlap to it because that was the original skirt I was going to use for Rodentia. But the burlap wasn't staying the way I wanted it to, and it just didn't quite look right. So I gave it to an ensemble member. Not as a, like, here you go, here's a failed project, but I think this would work better for you. And then kind of a gray top, and then there was a pink kind of almost rope thing that went over it. Oh, not yet. And so yeah, so all of them have very chaotic, very eccentric looks. I didn't really go through the design process for the ensemble. I just kind of decided, this looks like it'll work. Because I didn't necessarily have the time that I wanted to make 7 completely new looks, being semi-coherent, but not entirely. And as you can see on all of them, well, maybe you can't quite see, they all have patches, symbolizing that they are part of the squirrel army, and then they all like go and attack each other as part of the squirrel army. So yeah, so thank you.